Hello everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today I'm working on day 10 of ByTheWell4God's Fit for the Master's Use. Now you'll see me here use some paper that is not in the paper pack. This was sent to the team specifically. It was created by Laura from ByTheWell4God, and she sent it to us. It's pretty fun. It has all these skulls on it just because we have a bunch of bones and medical stuff in this month's kit with all the ephemera. And so I decided to take my die set, the Postale Die Set from Holts, and create a little miniature envelope to hold my flashcard for today. This is going to be paper clipped into my junk journal that I created in a previous video, so you can check that out afterwards if you want to see that. But I'm very simply just sewing the edges to give it some texture, and then I'm going to use the little flashcard from Romans 5:20, which says, "But where sin increased, grace abounded all the more." Now, if you saw the backside of that flashcard, I did handwrite one of the quotes that Judy used in this day's devotional. That quote was from J.C. Ryle, and he was talking about a true repentant heart. And his quote says, "True repentance begins with knowledge of sin, goes on to work sorrow for sin. It leads to confession of sin before God. It shows itself before a person by a thorough breaking off from sin. And it results in producing a deep hatred for all sin." And so I just really like that quote, so I added it to the backside of this flashcard. Now, I normally would have typed it out with my typewriter, but I thought it was too big of a quote to, put that all on the flashcard. So I wrote it in really tiny handwriting. But you'll see me here use some masking tape. I just put some alcohol inks on that to grunge it up a little bit. When I made this envelope with that die set, it did kind of break off a little bit of the top of that envelope. So I want to cover that up with this masking tape, and you won't notice it at all, and it'll help protect that edge. This Postale die set was a brand new one. I previously lost mine last month, and so I purchased a new one, and so those die sets can be very sharp to begin with. If it had a thicker paper, it probably wouldn't have cut just a little bit on the top of that envelope, so I wouldn't have to do this, but it doesn't really bother me. But you'll see that little masking tape go right there, and it'll help protect that edge so it doesn't break off even more. So you'll see kind of light peeking through it. That's all I'm saying, is that there's a little bit of light peeking through that edge that folds down. But now I'm just working on how I want to make this cluster. This is, challenging for me because usually I work in a huge interleaved Bible page. And so having a miniature little envelope is a little tricky, but I like trying to figure out what to do and what works, what I can hang off different edges and whatnot. But you'll see me here add some extra masking tape everywhere else so I can kind of tie that into the rest of the envelope. So you know me, I'm coming around all my ephemera pieces with a little bit of frayed burlap to knock back that white, especially since this background of the skull paper I have is very dirty and grungy. So I want to make sure that it is cohesive. And so I'm adding that to all the pieces, and then I'm going to start gluing this down to the envelope. I have an idea of how I want this laid out, but I also want to add some frayed burlap to the edges of this. Now, I did have to cut this down just a little bit, that flashcard, to fit in this envelope. It would have fit perfectly if I didn't sew it. My sewing edges kind of come into the envelope a little bit, but otherwise, if you have this die set, the envelope will fit those flashcards. So it's a really fun way to add a little something extra to your pages or projects. So you'll see me here add these little leaves, but here I realized that I wanted that tan one underneath the red ones. So I'm kind of going to pick that up, rip it up a little bit. Luckily, it didn't dry completely, so I have time to do that. That Barely Arts glue does dry super fast though. I was a little concerned about the backside of the ephemera pieces because they are stark white, but mostly when I'm going to see the backside of this is just when I open up the envelope to see the flashcard, so it's not that big of a deal because then the envelope flap actually covers that up. Otherwise, this envelope is going to be paper clipped down to one of the mini file folders. So not a huge deal on the back side of those leaves. So anyways, now I'm going to focus on the back side of this envelope. I had an idea to add some wax melts. However, since this envelope is so tiny, I don't have a wax stamp seal thing to use that is tiny enough. I know they do make mini little stamp seals, and I think that would be really fun, but I just didn't have one. So we're going to improvise here a little bit. At first I thought about using like an eraser top of a pencil, but I didn't know if that would melt or if it would give a good impression to the center. I also used my finger, which was kind of fun, except I did that a couple times. First time I did my finger, it worked great. It just was a little too large. Second time I did it too fast and I kind of burned my pinky. So make sure you wait a little bit before you dip your finger into the wax. But last time I tried it, I just decided to leave it simple like it is here, just some poured wax, and I made some extra little pieces like it was dripping. This gave me the best size for this envelope. With my fingerprint, it was just a little bit too large. No matter, you know, using my pinky finger, it still was a little too large. I thought that would be a really cool idea because we're talking about bodies and health checks and spiritual wellness checks. I thought that would be a cool touch, but it just didn't work out that way. So anyways, this is a fun little extra. If you don't have any wax seals, you can still use those little wax melts and make something fun. And so I added some of that almost score tape, it's scrapbook.com's version, to the bottom portion of the wax seal, the big one. And so that way I can tuck in the flap of the envelope behind it, and that will kind of hold it in place without gluing it. So the last thing I decided to do on this envelope is I felt like the front needed a little bit more texture since it's just paper basically. And so I used some of this cheesecloth, and my first thought was to just tuck some behind that floral piece. So I'm kind of lifting it up a little bit with my fussy cutting scissors and propping it under there first. And then I also decide that I'm going to come in with a word grace, I decided, with my Dymo label maker, because we have in Romans 5:20 talking about how grace abounded all the more, and I wanted to actually write that whole quote, but with these Dymo label makers, they kind of get the spacing weird and they're a little large, and so I just figured we would stick with grace here. So I'm adding that to the top of the cheesecloth, but then it makes it not so sticky, so adding a little bit more of that Barely Arts glue to the bottom of that. And then lastly, I'm just going to kind of pin this into my junk journal using one of Tim Holtz's mini clips, and it'll just kind of live in my junk journal as a page that you can kind of take out and look inside the envelope. So that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. I'll try to leave the links below to the products I used in the description, and I hope you have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.